Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the top 10 most user-friendly Ark Tames. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. In at number 10 we have got the Shadowmane, and this creature really does deserve to be on the list for me, as I always feel like I can just pick up and use a Shadowmane, boom, like that, easy, no issues whatsoever. And maybe some of its jumping abilities are a little bit hard to aim and get right and get where you want them to go. Personally, I'm not the best at that, but you don't really need all of that to use this creature effectively. You can kind of just gallivant around on the floor as you wish, and you can get some pretty accurate shots if you just line it up a little bit. It doesn't take too much thought. Obviously, it does deduct it from this list in kind of being further on, as it would be really far on if, you know, it didn't have that, but that does hinder it a bit. But considering also how great this is in water, it really does make it a very user-friendly creature for me. Apart from the tame method, of course, that's really not very user-friendly at all, but we're basically just talking about the controls and how easy it is to control, and in my opinion and from my personal judgment, it's very easy. Next up, we have got the Desz modus, and you kind of put the Griffin and the Snow out here as well. They're all kind of on the same boat. Any gliding flyer can be here with absolute ease, as these creatures are so easy to control, but probably like maybe one of the easiest to control in the game. It's just you are working with more than 2 dimensions, as you know, you're working in the sky, and people tend to have some issues sometimes with gliders and things like that in terms of controlling them, although it really does just ergonomically make sense, and it's pretty easy. Like, you really don't have to try to get this working, but to like fully get like that perfect swoop, perfect curve takes a little bit of time to practice and get that. I know they're not really strong arguments and being like, oh yeah, this is why they're so far back on the list, but these creatures are so close together in usability that it's really the smallest gains from the next creatures which actually benefit this. And the gliding makes it slightly more difficult in a way. It's just slightly harder to control than a normal flyer. I know, really not much of a hindrance, but still, it is there. Next up, we have got the Caro, and this is just kind of your bog standard land creature, and it's so easy to just move and control around. Its general kind of maybe lack in mobility compared to some other creatures on this list make it less user friendly inherently, because it's not got like the best turning circles in the world and all of that. And you could say you could put the Aloe here as well. I guess I am, because it's not going to be further on the list, but yeah, the slight kind of lack of mobility in this creature compared to creatures like the Spino, the Donus and the Thyla inherently make this less user friendly, but because it's so simple to control and so easy to control, it does have to be on the list for those reasons. And that's really why I love the Caro and its control set, because yes, it's not going to be the most mobile creature in the world. You probably wouldn't expect it out of this creature, but it's so simple and so easy to get, it simply has to be on this list. The same goes for the Aloe as well. That does have a little bit more mobility than the Caro. Personally, I do prefer the Caro, so that's why the Caro's on the list here instead of the Aloe. But for Aloe lovers, you just pretend that I'm talking about the Aloe here. They also do have the bleed ability. Doesn't really add to the user friendliness, but I guess it kind of does in general combat, as it does make combat significantly easier. Although when talking about user friendly things, you don't tend to talk about combat of Ark creatures. If you're more specifically, I should say, talking about user friendliness in general Ark creatures. But still, I think the Caro is definitely up there, and I'm happy to hear your thoughts on this decision as well. Next up, in number 7, we've got the Ichthyosaurus, and the reason why I'm putting it here is it just seems to be like the easiest underwater team to control. Like, the Mosa is just a little bit fiddly. The Megalodon is pretty easy as well, but none of them as easy to control as the Ichthyosaurus. And I always come back to this thing for that reason. It's just so simple. You don't really need it to do any kind of combat, although it does have an attack. Thankfully, it's not like the female Megalosaurus. You just use this thing to get from point A to point B, and you essentially just press a button, and there you go. And we technically 2 buttons on PC because it's W and Shift, but still, you press a button and then you point your mouse in a direction and it just goes that way. And it's so simple, especially for underwater creatures. When I think of like plesiosaurs and mosasaurs, they are so much more fiddly than they need to be. Personally, a TLC would be heavily warranted there, but it kind of does make sense. They are bigger, heavier creatures, but the Bastilo kind of gets it right it still isn't the most user-friendly, but that does just come to size. This thing is so small, so agile, so nimble, it really does give it a huge advantage for general user-friendliness. And in my opinion, it's like the most user-friendly ocean creature out there. I was tempted to put the Bloodstalker because it kind of is for me, but I know the Bloodstalker is an absolute hurdle to even learn to control properly in the first place, so obviously it couldn't make this list. Next up, we got the Rex, and the reason why I'm putting it above the Ichthyosaurus is you really just can't go wrong with controlling the Rex. And it's maybe not the most user-friendly because of its slight lack of mobility compared to like the Caro. It's more of a hindrance than not a hindrance, but you are working at a bit of a larger scale. You essentially just click and bite, and that's really all you use Rexes for, because you're probably mainly going to be using these things for bosses. I know that might aggravate quite a lot of people out there that use Rexes for so many other things. Personally, I only really use Rexes for bosses. There are just better creatures out there which I prefer for doing the other things. And actually, you'll notice as we go further down the list, we are just going to find more mobile creatures after more mobile creatures. And, you know, that is kind of just playing to a benefit of those creatures there. Inherently, their mobility makes them really easy to control and really easy to move. Whereas the Rex, it feels a little bit stodgy in a way, like how it's controlled. It just feels a bit like not as snappy as you'd want it to be in the user friendliness. And I get the Rex is definitely a very easy creature to control. Again, all of these creatures on the list are very, very easy to control. It's just with this creature, I feel like the mobility, the lack of mobility, I should say, really kind of doesn't make this creature as user friendly as it could be to control, but it doesn't really need that too much, as you're mainly just going to be clicking on this thing to do some attacks with it. At number 5, we have got the Spino, and this creature is here because of that mobility. The mobility inherently makes this a really successful and easy creature to use for anyone out there, as it can just very simply step over any kind of obstacle which you may face in the general Ark terrain, which does play huge benefit to itself. Just makes it easier to get around, and they're also really mobile in the water, which can't be said about the Rex. They're pretty much just great in every terrain, and they can turn 360 on the spot, so you'll have no worry about turning these things. It's not like driving a pickup truck and then having to backwards park up a hill or something stupid like that. No, it's just like casually driving along the highway with no issues whatsoever, and you'll find that with this creature, there's really nothing which can go wrong with it, and that is why it is just so inherently great. It's really powerful, it does a great job, it's heavily mobile, and it's really simple, and it's such a great creature for general usability. And for people that are new to Ark, I would recommend a creature like a Spino, because you really can't go wrong with controlling it. Again, kind of that point and click thing from the Rex, but now you've got some added mobility, so it's easier to turn around, easier to swim in the water as well, because you're probably going to want to do that at some point. And in my just experience, I kind of tend to win more general fights with Spinos than Rexes. Apart from obviously in bosses, they don't do quite as well because of their lower health stats, but if you get some nicely mutated ones, they really do benefit you hugely, and I'm sure you're going to very much enjoy using a creature like the Spino. Now, the Deinonychus just seems so simple to control for me, I had to put it on the list, and it doesn't even take full damage as well, which really does play a huge benefit into this creature. The next creature is quite similar to this in terms of general mobility. It just does one thing slightly better in a slightly nicer way, which is why I've put it up on the number 3 spot instead of the number 4 spot, which is where the Deinonychus is currently. It's not going to move, it's not like I'm just going to change that midway through the video, but essentially the Deinonychus is mainly more of a boss oriented creature, but it really does pack the mobility side of things as well. It's like essentially an upgraded Shadowmane for me. It can deal bleed damage to bosses, grapple onto them, all kinds of crazy stuff like that, and it does have the pack buff on top of it too. And from this you can probably tell that the Deinonychus are very fast agile creatures, also very easy to tame. Kind of user-friendly taming method, you could say. And there's a lot of ways you could apply user-friendly. Again, this video is mainly controls and controlling the creature, but you know, the taming method relatively user-friendly, can't be said for creatures like the Reaper or the Shadowmane, because the Shadowmane is not particularly user-friendly in its taming method. One of the most annoying in the game, in my opinion. That's just personal of mine. Actually, what do you think of the Shadowmane taming method? Comment your thoughts if you think it's difficult or just a piece of cake, or if you've never tamed the Shadowmane before, then just say you've never tamed the Shadowmane before. And this is the thing which the Thyla does better. Just spot the next creature. It is the Thyla. It kind of just jumps across rocks instead of just running up them. It just seems better to do that. Either way, let's go on to the Thyla. Yeah, so in at number 3, we got the Thyla. You probably would have guessed that because I spoiled it anyway. Either way, this creature also firstly does spawn on the island. Again, making it just more user-friendly just to the general public. I know I'm twisting the word a lot, but still, it's the map that everyone has, and you can see that climbing ability there. It just simply runs up any kind of vertical surface wall, all of that. Again, that really just makes the creature so much better for me in terms of climbing and all of that. And especially considering they spawn on the islands, they just slightly tipped over the edge over the Deinonychus for doing that stuff. If this was a better boss creatures though, the Deinonychus would easily win. And just for general versatility creatures, the Deinonychus would win as well. The Thyla also does take full damage, what a shame, but it does still deal that bleed damage, which really does play a huge benefit. They're also not too difficult to tame. I would say the Deinonychus is easier, but you know, it kind of really does depend on your setup and how lucky you are with the Redwoods biome, because sometimes it can be easy as cake, barely ever, but sometimes it's also absolute hell, and that is where taming these things can go badly. And you know, the same could be said for the Deinonychus, but I tend to find that that creature is easier to tame. The only real downsides with creatures like the Thyla nowadays in ASA is that the terrain is just so glitchy, bugged, and like just not designed well around the creatures anymore, that this thing just glitches all over the place and they'll get stuck on things, and that is something to definitely be aware of. So in ASA, this really isn't one of the more user-friendly creatures just because of the really messed up terrain. But in ASA, this thing is so nice and convenient to use. And in most of ASA, it does work pretty nicely. Just maybe don't take it up some steeper natural mountains. It does fine with all structures and trees and all of that, because, you know, they're going to stay the same. But anyway, ASA's terrain is very bugged, if you couldn't tell already. At number 2, we have got the Barry, and I'm probably going to get a lot of argument for this creature being in at this spot, but I just think it's like the most simple controls you can probably have for a dinosaur, and it works perfectly, and it doesn't infuriate. It travels at a decent speed. You can jump on it, or not on it, but you can jump with it like you're in a Mario game, you know. You just press the spacebar and away you go. You can jump and you can attack. And you can even do the spin attack in the water. And it's just so simple, but so well rounded, and also so easy to tame and so effective to use for any kind of caving. Makes that thing a much more user-friendly experience. It really is that just user-friendly creature. When I think of creatures that are just, you don't even think about controlling whatsoever. No one even needs to take any time to learn how to control one of these things. It's so simple. Essentially just like playing a Mario game, right? Super Mario Galaxy, you got the jump and you got the spin attack. It just works perfectly for it. And you can stun creatures up to the size of a Megalodon, making it pretty damn decent for those underwater caves. Something which you might not expect out of it, but if you realise it ate fish, or if you probably would, because you know most viewers here are Ark players, it makes sense that it's really good underwater. Either way, let's get into number 1. And in number 1, we got the RG, and for me, this is just the most simple creature to control. And I know it works on another dimension than the Baryonyx, but it doesn't have that spin ability or that jumping. But you know, you're in the sky, you essentially just point and fly, and you kind of could say the same about gliders, but the gliding makes it significantly just generally more finicky and less user friendly, and with basically minimal effort you can get that to work really easily. But just right out of the gate, you've never flown one of these before, you just know, and picking up stuff so easy, and it travels at a nice speed where everything is easy to pick up, easy to like just not miss. And the user friendliness you get from gathering metal with this thing is insane, and with that weight reduction, they're just really a cruise creature. Like if you hired maybe a 5-star cruise liner, this is like the equivalent to that. Also, their saddle acts as a portable smithy, so if you need to repair any metal on any of your adventures, you can with absolute ease. And if you need to heal up quickly, you can do that as well, which inherently makes it just quite user friendly, because if you end up getting this thing really beaten up in a fight, then yeah, you're really not going to have too many issues with healing, as long as there are some creatures in the area that don't absolutely decimate you, because that might be a little bit of an issue. And yes, you could say doing some of the sky battles is just inherently finicky, but just generally using this creature, maybe not for combat, but still that's alright for me. Generally using this creature, I just find it to be the most user-friendly creature in the game, and it's so useful. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I really hope that you all enjoyed, as I did definitely enjoy making it. As always, comment down below what is the most user-friendly Ark creature to you, and if you didn't agree with this list, put your 10 in the comments below, and I will see you all later.